Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to the SADC Regional Focus Forum, being hosted on the sideline of annual investment meeting in Abu Dhabi. Thank you very much for you who have taken some time to attend this forum. I would like to thank also the ambassador from Lesotho, exactly, and also other government officials that are here represented in this SADC Regional Focus Forum. As we proceed, I'm going to invite Madame Stella Shimwena Ngoma, Director, Investment Promotion and Facilitation of the Malawi Investment and the Trade Center, to welcome the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mario. Honorable Ambassador, senior government officials here present, Chairman and Chief Executive Officers of the SADC member states, government officials of SADC member states, government officials of the United Arab Emirates, the SADC Secretariat staff, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you today at the SADC Business Forum. We are thankful that you've taken time to come and join us, despite having other programs running at the 12th edition of the annual investment meeting. Allow me to thank the commitment and willingness of the government of the United Arab Emirates, in particular the Minister, Dr. Tani Ahmed Al-Zayudi, in supporting the SADC region in their efforts to create deeper and meaningful regional integration. Ladies and gentlemen, SADC adopted the Protocol of Finance and Investment in 2006 to basically foster investment in the region. The protocol outlines SADC policy on investment, encouraging member states to enact strategies aimed at attracting investors and implement legislation that creates a favorable environment for investment. The SADC industrialization strategy and roadmap and the action plan calls for deeper integration, and that facilitates increased FDI inflows and integration into the global value chains. Moreover, it calls on member states to implement investment strategies and investment-friendly policies to attract FDI resources that increase productive capacity and facilitate technological and skills transfer. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in July 2021, the Ministerial Task Force adopted the SADC Business and Investment Promotion Strategy, BIPS. The main objective of the SADC BIPS are to complement the Investment Promotion Agency's investment promotion strategy. Secondly, is to present and promote SADC as an FDI destination. And thirdly, is to create and maintain the visibility of SADC as a regional investment destination. The Business Investment Promotion Strategy focuses on establishing and maintaining a highly visible regional investment brand, the development of an attractive regional business and investment climate, annual provision of information on the regional economy, and establishing a symbiotic relationship with the regional and international business community. Very recently, the Secretariat developed the implementation plan of the SADC Business and Investment Promotion Strategy to help the region enhance skills that promote and attract investments into the region. Under the theme Infrastructure Development in Support of Industrialization and Regional Integration, the main objective of SADC Regional Focus Forum is to attract foreign direct investment to the SADC region through showcasing of programs and projects to various key decision makers and businesses who are willing to engage in sustainable partnerships and further benefit from the variety of features aimed at facilitating strategic networking and promote the SADC region as the most attractive zone for business and investments. It is our desire, therefore, to discuss good practice in public-private investments, partnerships, and create a mechanism to develop cross-cutting networks involving SADC member states, investors, bankers, development partners, toward the re-engineering of member states to be more catalytic and dynamic tools of investment attraction for sectoral development. To this effect, we will have two high-level panel discussions. One on coordination and investment opportunities for unlocking the development of regional infrastructure projects, and the second one on industrial and value chains development. This is because we recognize that despite SADC having made significant progress in regional infrastructure development, the economic transformation of the SADC region will require adequate and functioning infrastructure that will guide the region towards front-loading industrialization in the context of evolving technology. This means that the infrastructure development in support of the region integration will aim towards interconnected networks and quality, seamless, cross-border infrastructure that will be pivotal in facilitating the movement of people, goods, services, and knowledge. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, finally, allow me to thank the Secretariat and the AIM Congress for the thoroughness they exercised in preparing this event. This will make our discussions easier and more efficient. With these remarks, I would like to thank you all for your attention and look forward to a fruitful discussion and materialization of concrete investments. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your welcome and keynote remarks, Madame Stella Ngoma. As we proceed, I'm now going to call Mrs. Angel Pretorius. Mrs. Angel Pretorius is the chairman of the SADC Business Committee, and she's also the Deputy Director for Investment Services, Minister of Industrialization and Trade of Namibia. Ms. Angel, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Master of Ceremonies, distinguished Chief Executive Officers of SADC Investment Promotion Agencies, senior government officials from SADC member states and the SADC Secretariat, members of the business fraternity present here today, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is my distinct pleasure to provide you with an overview of the business and investment climate in the SADC region, which will set the scene of our panel discussions this afternoon. As SADC member states, we do acknowledge that creating a favorable investment climate includes developing new labor skills, expanding on infrastructure, as well as extending and diversifying our economies. Together with implementing a transparent and legal regulatory system, maintaining political peace and macroeconomic stability, we can enhance our participation in legal and global value chains, including establishing a conducive business environment for investors. Putting the SADC region into perspective, I'm quoting from the UNCTAD World Investment Report of 2022, which reports that global foreign direct investment flows in 2021 were around $1.58 trillion, up 64% from the level during the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic of less than $1 trillion. FDI flows to Africa reached $83 billion, a record level from $39 billion US dollars in 2020, accounting for 5.2% of global FDI. Most recipients saw a moderate rise in FDI after the fall in 2020 caused by the pandemic. The total for the continent was inflated by a single intra-firm financial transaction in South Africa in the second half of 2021. Excluding that transaction, the increase in Africa remained moderate, including Southern Africa. In fact, in Southern Africa, FDI jumped to $42 billion US dollars due to the mentioned large corporate reconfiguration in South Africa, as well as a new project announcements, including a clean energy finance deal and a greenfield project. Having said that, attracting and facilitation of investment is central to the sustainable development and integration agenda of SADC member countries. We therefore believe as a group that facilitating improving easy access into our region is crucial for investors to establish or expand their businesses and enterprises in our countries. Furthermore, we are confident that cooperation between member states, coupled with extended collaboration with the private sector, will aid the region to realize the SADC ambition of deeper regional integration, industrialization, and infrastructure development. Actually, SADC member states have long embarked on taking concrete steps to improve the investment climate, and working towards that investment supports industrialization and SME development. Centered to driving the agenda on investment under the SADC and Investment Protocol, which has been mentioned before, that all member states subscribe to, is the Investment Subcommittee. The Investment Subcommittee, which is also responsible for hosting the forum today, is charged with implementing a variety of programs and projects that are aimed to improve the investment and business environment in the region. Probably the most extensive program that the subcommittee has been engaged with is the implementation of the Regional Action Program on Investment, or RAPI as we call it. This program has 4 components, which consists of the development and harmonization of the relevant policies and frameworks to attract and promote both domestic investment and FDI, the creation of investment promotion initiatives in the region, the development of relevant platforms to sharing investment information, and lastly, the development of an investment platform for peer sharing and best practices. Another important project that the subcommittee is engaged with is the development of an investment policy framework, which aims at guiding member states in developing their national action plans for investment. Through the investment policy framework, SADC has supported member states to meet the growth challenges by placing transparent and accountable institutions, market access and competition, inclusiveness and economic integration at the center of the region's strategy for attracting sustainable private investment. At present, 8 member states have developed national action plans to implement the investment policy framework. Now, complementing the investment policy framework is the SADC bilateral treaty template, which is a set of guidelines for investment treaty negotiations. Though not binding, it provides for innovative provisions that are reviewed by member states every 2 years, allowing for further reform approaches to be included. Finally, with regard to our forum today, we focused on the theme infrastructure development in support of industrialization and regional integration, because as a SADC group, we are aware that the region currently has a huge infrastructure deficit, which needs to be addressed as it plays a key role in creating economic growth through a larger market and greater trade and investment opportunities. However, we deemed it equally important to also emphasize on industrial and value chains development, as this is the needed impetus for the realization of our industrialization objectives for inclusive growth, economic diversification, enhanced competitiveness, and deeper regional integration. Ladies and gentlemen, With that background information, I now trust that you can look forward to our 2 thematic panel discussions, which I believe will be both informative and engaging. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, for your presentation of the overview of the businesses and the investment climate in the entire SADC region. Now, as mentioned by Chair, we'll have the first panel discussion on coordination and investment opportunities for unlocking the development of regional infrastructure project. I will call the panelists as well as the moderator for this event to take their seats. Thank you so much. Mr. Dlamini, please, you may come and take your seat.
Okay, good morning. Oh, it's afternoon already. Sorry about that. Let me start by acknowledging the presence of ambassadors here present, chief executive officers, all senior government officials. Good afternoon. I'm Tranklina Gabuntuni from Botswana Investment and Trade Center, and I've been asked to moderate this afternoon session, which is mainly focusing on coordination and investment opportunities for unlocking the development of regional infrastructure projects. And having said that, I've been joined here by distinguished experts from Eswatini, Madagascar, Mauritius, and the SADC Secretariat. And having said that, as this theme indicates, it's on coordination and investment opportunities for unlocking the development of regional infrastructure. As we are all aware, infrastructure development plays a critical role in economic growth and also facilitation of foreign direct investment. Lack of infrastructure affects productivity and also it increases, obviously, the cost of production. It hinders growth and also reduces competitiveness. The SADC has taken deliberate action to develop strategies that are looking into infrastructure development and with a view really to facilitate growth or foreign direct investment for member states. This includes the Regional Indicative Strategic Development Plan that is really focusing on 5 pillars, which is energy, ICT, meteorology, water, and transportation. So those are the 5 pillars that the SADC is focusing on. But having said that, obviously the other speakers have talked about the insufficient infrastructure that we have as the SADC region that really hinders the economic growth of the region. But I'm going to direct my question. The first one will be directed to Mr. Dlamini from the Kingdom of Eswatini, which is mainly focusing on how can regional infrastructure development support industrialization and trade facilitation. Mr. Dlamini.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Good afternoon to everyone. Madam Moderator, as you've rightly indicated that in SADC, most of the areas of interventions are on ICT, energy, transportation, water and sanitation. So basically, under these areas, as you are aware that we are implementing various trade agreements regionally and globally, we need to make sure that we've got consistency in energy for us to be able to tap into these international markets and regional markets. We also need to make sure that our railway networks and transport are able to support businesses locally and internationally so that they are able to penetrate our markets and we exploit the available preferential trade agreements that are available in the region, as well as we need the water and sanitation for storage purposes and also for consumption, clean water consumption. And we know businesses use all of these facilities to continue for their production. And lastly, the issue of ICT. We know that digital transformation has allowed businesses to continue to conduct businesses over virtual platforms. So basically, we really need those to support businesses in the region. Moderator, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dlamini. And I'm going to go on and continue with this discussion. The second question, I'm going to direct it to Ms. Rakomotola Lantoswa. I believe I'm pronouncing it right. She's the chairperson of Economic Development Board of Madagascar. I think we've heard what Mr. Dlamini said. Infrastructure really plays a critical role. He touched on the pillars that the SADC strategy is looking into. But yours is really, I want you to just highlight some of the benefits and cooperative advantages of investing in the SADC region.
First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to this panel. And in advance, sorry for my lack of English also, but I'm trying to do it my best. So to that question on comparative advantage of investing in the SADC region, I think the main point is on the title, infrastructure development to support industrialization and regional integration. In that way, we have all reforms and investment climate, let's say, favorable for infrastructure development in the SADC region. It was said earlier that harmonizing all the FDI and local investment also to be attracted over the region is key to develop our infrastructure. But my main point is at regional level and individual country level, because we know, as an example, that at government level, for each country, the priority is like not aligned at regional level. So I think that's one point that we today are on the way at the SADC region to align and harmonize. So that's one key point on the comparative advantage. So we talk about access to 370 millions of markets in the region, so it's a huge market. But it was said earlier also that we have a huge deficit in terms of infrastructure. I can say that it's a huge opportunity, not a huge deficit, because as a regional level, this should be an opportunity to invest and to attract again FDI on those infrastructure that we need to develop in the country and in the region. So I would like to say that the opportunities, as said earlier by my colleague here, is that at the global level, the country is know what are the deficits, for example. But in some cases, we need to make at a regional level to have this kind of experience sharing. An example that I can mention in the case of Madagascar, we are now like experiencing PPP to attract FDIs and private sector locally, but we need to learn also at the regional level what can we have as experience at regional level. So that's the things that I think is on the way today at SADC levels, that we, as individual countries, we are going to learn each other and to move together to attract a regional SADC as a regional investment destination. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Lantoswa. I think to continue with our discussion, I'm going to go on to the Mr. Somali from the Economic Development of Mauritius. The next question that I would want us to tackle is on how can we transform or innovate investment for infrastructure development in SADC?
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's an excellent opportunity for us to showcase Africa and SADC today to this 12th annual conference and meeting given by the opportunity by the Abu Dhabi and the UAE to welcome us today from SADC perspective. SADC, like most of us know, but it's a South African development community of countries that has been very successful and possess rich resources in terms of energy. Mauritius has come very, let's say, successful in terms of structuring business in Africa, but also in many parts of the world like India. And this morning I was looking at a small report, and from the OECD, they have informed us that the total global infrastructure investment requirements for 2030 for transport, electricity generation, transmission and distribution, telecommunication would be around $71 trillion. And this figure represents 3.5% of the annual world GDP from 2020 to 2030 for the next 10 years. And this is only for Africa. And when we look at these numbers from an economic perspective, you will see that the growing infrastructure gaps through tax revenues and aid alone will not be sufficient. And Africa and SADC community would need to work more on the private investment and infrastructure. Today, to reply to your question about innovation or transformation, I would say I have 7 ideas that I could share for you and for SADC members is through our experience in Mauritius, what we have done very well, and for the last consecutive years, we have been very successful in attracting FDI and how we transform the economy, and we are working with SADC countries on many initiatives. So number 1 will be, like most of you, my colleagues have said, PPP. We have to involve more collaboration between the public and private sector. Private sector needs to be encouraged, and because this alleviates the pressure on governments to only invest in the country. And once we get more of the private sectors, this allows the model to be more flexible and brings more expertise, risk sharings and reward. It has been very successful in certain countries. For example, on roads, infrastructure, you would see that China, Abu Dhabi, they all have investment that have put in Africa, but also the risk sharing and also the structuring of ports and of the power plants, because energy is going to be the next important key game changer in sustainable growth. And that's where I believe that innovation in energy transformation would be very, very important together with infrastructure. When we look at infrastructure, we also look at the infrastructure bonds. I would say in a financial market, many of these bonds has to be structured in such a way that we raise capital outside Africa and we reinvest into Africa so as to be able to bring higher returns to investors, but over and above to be an attractive proposition from an institutional and government perspective towards many other countries. That's something that we have to be better into marketing ourselves and better in terms of, let's say, mobilizing significant amount of capital. Capital in any country or business is the lifeblood of development. And I would say when we speak about capital, sovereign wealth funds are very important. I would encourage, let's say, private sector, but government to sit together and look at the accumulated surplus of revenues dedicated by sector. And these revenues would be much well utilized in terms of long-term financing, stability, and attracting sustainable development in key countries amongst these SADC countries. On the infrastructure investment fund, I would say this crowd pooling and crowdfunding is very important. Today with digitalization, we could be doing crowdfunding online. And these, with digitalization and the new advent of digital stock exchange, I believe that we have a superb opportunity to create a vibrant capital market within Africa. Africa is a granary for food, but it also has a lot of resources. So today, the world is looking at Africa in terms of what we can give to them. But on the other side, there is a win-win situation. And we all, on the SADC community, I think we have to sit together. And this is what I was talking to Angela and my colleagues from Malawi, is we need to have more, let's say, collaboration. We need to, the tips of the day is to sit together, discuss, and align our success stories. Over and above that, I would say the development of financial institutions. We host today in Africa most of the bigger banks. We are served by correspondent bank worldwide, and we need to encourage them to work with us to develop our economies. Because I believe, coming from a finance background, that the innovation has to go through digital, but also through finance. Last but not least is also about transparency in whatever we do. We have to inculcate good corporate governance and also effective project management. I believe aligning strategies would be the game changer for Africa to innovate more in terms of digitalization, but also aligning policies and having a well-targeted approach in whatever we do in our SADC project plan for 2050, but also in the vision for Africa for 2050. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Somali. That was very insightful. But before maybe I could ask Mr. Moyo from SADC Secretariat, I would want to address one question to Mr. Dlamini, just to also for you to comment on what are the opportunities for infrastructure and investment in the SADC region. Are there any opportunities that we foresee? We all note that investment in infrastructure is critical. What are the opportunities that you foresee that we could, as SADC, consider investing in?
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I think, as we all know, that in SADC we have an infrastructure a requirement of $170 billion, and basically we need to close that gap because currently we're at 68 billion in terms of the investment. So that is where we then see that opportunity to say, can we as SADC get other development partners to come on board to finance the infrastructure gap in terms of whether in the rail system or in the road systems, because we are challenged by poor road system, which then basically become a challenge as we continue with trade. So in this respect, SADC can be tasked in terms of being the secretariat to come up with proposals to development partners such as the World Bank or other financial institutions that can come on board, because as the colleague has rightly mentioned, that we need crowdfunding that can come in to kind of finance this infrastructure shortages. So we basically need to find a model that can try and address this issue so that we are able to function optimally as a region to make sure that we're a global player with all respect. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Dlamini. I note that it's critical for us to explore a different financing model. And I'm now going to call on Mr. Moyo from the Program Officer Energy, SADC Secretariat, just maybe to highlight on what financing instruments are available to develop the regional project. This is in particular focusing on the project preparation and development facility.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. for that question. Maybe just to give context of where we're coming from, and before I go into the actual question on the financing instruments. When the SADC heads of states adopted the Regional Infrastructure Development Master Plan, it contained a compendium of projects that had to be developed at a regional level. And when we talk about regional projects, we are really focusing on those projects that are transboundary in nature, or those projects that could be in country but have a regional impact. But one of the challenges after adopting that compendium in 2012 was that some of the projects were not yet prepared and ready for investments. So SADC Secretariat then decided to come up with what we call SADC Project Preparation and Development Facility as one of the financing instruments to take this project to a bankable stage. So basically, the facility does pre-feasibility studies and feasibility studies for these infrastructure projects so that they are ready for the investors. And the facility began its operation in 2014 and to date has prepared a number of projects in the transport sector, energy sector, and water sector. It ideally also covers the other sectors, including ICT. But what we've come to realize is that the ICT sector, private sector, really comes in terms of preparing these projects before they actually do the actual construction of the projects. But for the other sectors, we had to do a lot more work in terms of preparing those projects so that they are bankable and we could present to investment forums such as the one that we are participating in currently. But beyond that, we also have worked with different institutions that have also helped the SADC region in terms of preparing projects. To mention some of them, they include the NEPAD Infrastructure Project Preparation Facility, which is a facility under the African Development Bank. We've worked on the infrastructure investment program for Southern Africa, which is called IPSAS, supported by the EU to also assist the region in terms of preparing these projects. Now, going forward beyond the preparation stage, for the water sector, we created what we call the SADC Water Fund. So once we do prepare this project, how are these water projects going to be implemented? So the SADC Water Fund has gone further to assist the region in developing some of these water projects, water sector projects. So I could mention two of some of the projects that are under implementation right now under the SADC Water Fund, which includes the Kazungula Water Supply Project between Botswana and Zambia. And then we have the Lomacha-Namacha Water Supply and Sanitation Project between Mozambique and Eswatini. But of course, more needs to be done. We still need a lot more investors to come on board to try and develop this project in the water sector, as we may all know that the water sector is looked more as a social or public good. So investment in that sector is critical. When it comes to the transport sector, we are advocating for models that have already been mentioned here, like the PPP model, so that we could develop some of this regional transport sector. A good example that has been developed with such a model is the N4 toll road project between Mozambique and South Africa, which basically utilized toll concessions for that development, with the governments of Mozambique and South Africa only providing guarantees for that project, and private sector doing the rest. So with such kind of models, we expect projects to be developed at a regional level, probably in a more faster way than just looking at the public, which is the government investing in this project. And that's why we're calling for investors to come in and also participate in such regional programs. For the energy sector, we haven't really had, I can say, major challenges in terms of developing generation projects, in the sense that, well, if I can say that generation projects can easily get power purchase agreements, and in that sense, it might we end up developing generation projects a little bit faster compared to regional transmission projects. However, there are still challenges in that sector, as indicated in the other session when I attended the session from Zimbabwe. We have a shortfall generation supply, which provides an opportunity for the region for investors to come in to try and boost our generation supply. But on a regional level, when it comes to transmission infrastructure for developing regional transmission projects, because the transmission projects are only looked at in terms of the flow of power between different member states, getting financing for such projects has proven to be challenging. So what we've done at the SADC Secretariat is to try and come up with a different way of looking at financing regional infrastructure projects by trying to come up with what we call a regional transmission infrastructure financing facility. And with this facility, we're trying to ring fence the revenues that are being generated through those regional transmission projects by power trading through what we call the Southern African Power Pool electricity market, and creating special purpose vehicles that could then fast track the development of some of these regional transmission projects. It's worth mentioning here that since 2007, when we developed the Angola-Zambia interconnector, we've never developed a regional transmission interconnector until now, when we're just developing the Malawi-Mozambique interconnector. So with this facility, we are hoping that it will bring on board more regional transmission infrastructure, which we've already prepared and is ready for investments. And through these facilities, this is also a platform where investors could come on board and participate through the regional transmission infrastructure financing facility to develop more transmission projects. So, Madam Moderator, with those words, I think I'll end here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very detailed, and in terms of covering the plans that are underway. I think you will all agree with me that it's critical. Infrastructure development in the SADC region is a critical matter. And for us as the region to be competitive, obviously we need to develop our region. And in terms of movement, ease of movement of goods, services and people, we need that infrastructure development. And thank you very much for touching on all those key points. But having said that, I'm going to also go back to Mr. Somali, just to ask you on the opportunities that you see. I know other panelists have touched on those opportunities that you see that as a region we could focus on, infrastructure development opportunities that you, in your view, we could focus on.
Thank you. So the opportunities I see in the SADC region is there is manifold to it in terms of creating the right ecosystem to develop the infrastructure around for the Southern Development Community. So because we have not been able to attract a lot of foreign investors, the major players and the multinationals in many aspects, because the ecosystem is very important. And one of the things that we do have in the SADC is also the labor force, the demography the population, Africa is a rising continent. SADC is rising. And everywhere where you look at it, there is a lack of skill, aging population. And I would say I'm very impressed because working for Africa for many years now in different commercial and international banks, I would say we have a women community that is very vibrant in Africa. That doesn't really exist everywhere, where women are really involved in all these. I would say there would need to be, over and above infrastructure, I would say there would need to be a change in mindset to let women empowerment take over. This is a point that I wanted to say. Also because today, our African world leaders needs to be ladies, needs to be women. They need to be that equality, because the expertise demonstrated across Africa through women leadership is tremendous. I would say over and above, when we look at projects, Africa offers double-digit returns. And this is where we need to put more about sustainable growth in Africa. We have a full continent and we have a lot of space available to be looking at. When you look at infrastructure, infrastructure has to be done in a different way. We cannot only look at infrastructure, because today with mobility, with COVID that has taught us how to be, digitalization is a major aspect of creating the right system. Today, fiber optics from South Africa going to Mauritius, we have one of the best communication network. And when you look at the potential that exists in terms of resource, we have lots of mines. And the world is looking to us on platinum, gold, name it, whatever. I think in the South, we're a very rich country. The only thing is we need to put the policies right and to have e-procurement system, whether from government, to encourage a fast tracking of projects, because the speed to market is very important. I was this morning discussing with Abu Dhabi Chamber of Commerce, and they told me, Isa, the only thing is speed to market. Whatever you say, do it today, not tomorrow. And I think that commitment has to be there if we need to be innovative, because everyone needs to be fast track. We cannot say this is a private client, this is a normal client. Everyone, investors, has to be high value client for us. Everything has to be seamless, and I think working on a cross-border, let's say, digital system, I think today the Generation Z is surpassing the world, and they are becoming the world leaders. When you look at the Forbes fortunes, you would see that the generation is becoming the richest. And in the next 20, 30 years, you will see all the youngsters taking the world. And this is where we need to promote our young population. And this is where we need to take digitalization in improving infrastructure. Today you have virtual exhibition, you have virtual meetings, and you can even sign virtual papers. We have virtual cards. Banks are becoming cashless. Digital currencies are there. We are living a different world. I remember when I was talking to certain governors, when I was at the central bank myself, they were talking about one currency for Africa. I think we need to do that. I think the time is not to wait and let us be surpassed. I believe that we have a lot of abilities to transform infrastructure, create an ecosystem for education. We could be the hub for education if we want. But only thing is we can have virtual universities. You don't need to be in Harvard. You can have a Harvard in Namibia. You can have a Harvard in Malawi. We need to encourage these people to have our universities in Africa. Education is also important in doing the right thing and providing the right skill. And if you look at roads, I believe that roads are the quality of communication through the roads, through air connectivity. This is something that is very important that we have to continuously encourage, have modernized airports and ports. If you want to be the best in terms of logistics, you will need to have the most sophisticated ports. And I believe that we have that potential, and Africa is the future.
Okay, thank you very much for that very insightful deliberation. But as we move on to the last one, Ms. Lantosha, I would want to also get your views in terms of the opportunities of infrastructure investment. What are your views on that particular one?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. When we talk about the opportunities in terms of infrastructure, I would like to give my point in terms of impact of infrastructure. I agree on what was said earlier, but my view on that is that sometimes the impact, let's say, for example, when we are going to build a school, university, professional training center, it's an infrastructure that will impact for human capital, but in some cases, when the government is like listing his investment on that way, education, they don't have in mind that it's going to be served for the global economy. So how can we communicate and sensibilize again in terms of impact of infrastructure? That's one thing that I think interesting that we need at SADC level to share all of those aspects of impact of infrastructure because it can be global impact. What I would like to say is that there is like a kind of silo thinking when we think of infrastructure. For example, people working on roads, they think that they build road only, but there is impact for that infrastructure for another region, another aspect of the economy. So we need to communicate more on that. My second point is after communication is to involve all stakeholders. As you know today, when we talk about ESG, environmental, social, and governance, it's one of the key criteria for investment all around the world. So how can we go also to treat all of those aspects? I give an example. In Madagascar, this is an example that I can mention. When you talk about infrastructure, we spend lots of time to speak to population, for example, because the impact is not like communicated, and that's the things that we need to learn on how to consider all of those impacts, because the debate is like a debate, public debate, and at the end of the day, it can constrain the investment. So the second point on the ESG aspect of infrastructure is one thing that we need also now to integrate in our policy at regional level and to share expertise and experiences on that way. So I think those 2 points is to complete all of the points of my colleagues here, how to communicate on the impact and how also to learn today, not to wait on the ESG impact of investment. All sectors are here to be able to align on all of those aspects, in my view. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we've now come to the end of our discussion, but as other panelists here have indicated, we note all of us that indeed infrastructure development is key to drive our economy, for our economy as the SADC region to really grow. we need that infrastructure. And as stipulated in the strategy of infrastructure development, it's key to expand on our ICT, our water resources, our transportation. We've noted deficiencies in some areas, but as we move as the SADC region, we need to move together, collaborate, so that we can be competitive as a region. Thank you very much for taking time and having insightful discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. And also thank you, panelists, for sharing your thoughts and reflection on how to coordinate and leverage the opportunities on infrastructure in the SADC region. I took note of some key message which came to me. For instance, the infrastructure impact sharing, the need for project financing, as well as infrastructure finance through the mobilization of multilateral development finance institutions, such as the Regional Development Fund, such as the African Development Bank. On this one, I would like to inform the meeting, for instance, that SADC Secretariat is working with the African Development Bank in order to operationalize the SADC Regional Development Fund. So everything meets what we are doing in the SADC Secretariat. Thank you so much. Now, I would like to acknowledge the presence of His Excellency Lovemore Mazemo, Ambassador of Zimbabwe to the United Arab Emirates, is there present, as well as the Permanent Secretary for Industry and Trade, Dr. Mavis Sibanda from Zimbabwe. Thank you so much. Okay, we can now proceed for the high-level panel discussion number 2, industrial and value chain development. We will discuss issues related to agro-processing, mineral beneficiation, pharmaceutical, leather, and textile. I will invite now the moderator as well as the panelists to take your seats. Thank you.
Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our second high-level panel discussion. Us from the SADC region of Southern Africa. So this discussion, as has been indicated in the introduction, we're talking of industrial and value chains development, and specifically we're looking how we can value add our agro-processing sectors, mining beneficiation. I think Southern Africa has a lot of mineral wealth. Pharmaceuticals, again, another key area where we believe that value chains can be developed. Leather, from all the beef or cattle that we slaughter in the region. Textiles, from the cotton that we grow in the ground. Hopefully that turns into clothing. And then tourism as well and other services. So my name is Tafaz Gwachinamo. I am the CEO of the Zimbabwe Industrial and Development Agency. And we are essentially the investment promotion agency in that country, obviously seized with these value chain developments and trying as much as we can to draw investment into this sector. To help me in the discussion today, in no particular order of their sitting, so I'll name them and then in a short while ask each of them to just introduce themselves, who they are and what institutions they represent. So we have Ms. Stella Chimwemwe Ngoma, Director, Investment Promotion and Facilitation, Malawi. Maybe just, oh no, sorry, yes, she's right there. We also have Ms. Teboho, excuse me, Tsekoa, Investment Promotion Manager, Minister of Trade and Industry, Business Development and Tourism from Lesotho. We also have Nomu Mapose, Investment Manager, IPX Mozambique. And then lastly, but certainly not least, Mr. Kalistas Talafile, Director in Industrial Development and Trade, SADC Secretariat. Right. So this is the panel that's going to unpack this topic that we've decided is important and pertinent for our region. Maybe just by way of introduction from each panelist, if I start with my brother here from Mozambique, just a brief introduction of his institution and just frame very briefly this topic that we have.
Good afternoon, everybody. Excellencies, Honorable Ambassador, in attending this event, the distinguished businessmen, dear colleagues from the SADC region, dear colleagues from the panel, ladies and gentlemen, it's with a great pleasure that we take part in this panel, to which attach great importance, taking account the importance of industrialization and value addition to our products, and the need to close the gap that we see that does exist in the entire region. So, but before we proceed, I would briefly introduce myself. My name is Nuno Mapos. I'm the economic advisor at the Investment and Export Promotion Agency of Mozambique, shortly known as APEX. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Program Director.
And then to my sister,
moderator.
just an introduction, the institution that you represent, and the relevance of this topic today.
Thank you very much, moderator. Distinguished ambassadors, colleagues, participants here. My name is Deboho Tsekwa from Lesotho. I am Investment Promotion Manager in the Ministry of Trade, Industry, Business Development and Tourism, under the Department of Industry. We are tasked with policy development, investment policy, industrial policy, special economic zones policy. That is the mandate of the department. That is what brings my relevance to this panel today that I'm participating in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And from my sister Stella Chimweme from Malawi, the significance of this in relation to Malawi and the whole SADC region.
Thank you very much, moderator. My name is Stella Ngoma. I'm the Director of Investment Promotion and Facilitation in Malawi. So basically, as an institution, our mandate is really to promote FDI into the country. And this topic really is important because we see it as one of the avenues that we can use to increase our integration within the region and indeed reach out to the global value chains. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And then I would also like to call upon our representative from SADC Secretariat. So this is how serious our region is. We actually have a secretariat based in Gaborone, Botswana, and it's fully staffed by officers that take care of all the sectors and all the facets of our economy. So maybe why SADC thinks this is an important topic and your role in all this. So as you're also introducing ourselves, perhaps I'll pose the first question to you in that regard, is that what is the state of play of industrialization in the region? I mean, why is it important that we are talking about this? Where are the problems and why do we believe it's important that we have this?
Now, I don't know which one to use. Maybe I should have both of them. Which one is working? Okay. Thank you. I believe I was introduced. But I'm wearing two hats, moderator, as Acting Director, Industrial Development and Trade at the SADC Secretariat. That's the directorate that was responsible for coordinating the SADC, the coordinating implementation of the SADC industrialization strategy and the roadmap. The job I was recruited for is that of being responsible for value chains in SADC. That's my role. So really, I'm at the core of the SADC industrialization strategy in terms of the role that I do. The state of play. Well, I guess it's in terms of the goals that we set ourselves, in terms of industrialization, where we are, or where are we? I think that's really the question. We had, as a region, determined a number of goals, and the main indicator we have been targeting to gauge whether we are industrializing or not has always been the share of the manufacturing value added to GDP. That's the number we always look at. It's probably not the best of numbers if you look at it, because it's quite relative. It fluctuates, depends on what happens to other sectors. By the time we adopted the strategy, we were hovering around 11-12%. That's where we are at the moment. So in other words, we have not moved. But if you look at that number, as I said, obviously it would show that we have not moved. Another number, alternative number you'd want to look at to gauge whether we are industrializing or not, is the growth of the manufacturing sector itself in SADC. Unfortunately, the last 2 years of COVID have been hard on the sector. So basically, we have not really moved from where we were some 5-7 years ago. We had determined that we needed to grow faster than we were doing to be able to catch up and to ensure that we are able to industrialize and create the much needed jobs, reduce poverty, and so forth. Our growth currently is sitting, I know we are recovering from COVID, so the numbers slightly went up, but we haven't really, on average for the last 7 years or so, been above 2%. I think in sum, it's to say, looking at those numbers, we have not moved much in terms of industrialization. And some would argue, are we disindustrializing or actually industrializing, but maybe we are picking up the wrong numbers and so on. I think that's the question that everyone asks. But the numbers that we have clearly shows that we might not be industrializing in SADC. That's not so much different from most of the developing world, but anyway, we have to focus on SADC. The next question that would come from there is really why, maybe I have to address that later, why could it be that we are not moving or we are not industrializing, at least based on the numbers that we have? I don't know if you want me to speak to that.
Or perhaps we can just open that up. So what we're hearing from SADC is that we are not industrializing. There are certain targets that we are failing to meet. And if I could just start with you, Stella, what would you say is holding us back? Is it across all sectors? In the introduction, we're speaking of agro-processing, we're speaking of mineral beneficiation, pharmaceuticals, leather, textile, and clothing. Is this state of our lack of industrialization, is it common across all, or there's some areas where we're doing well? I mean, what would you say is that if you look at it across the sectors?
Thank you so much, moderator. Maybe just to pick on what the previous speaker said. In Africa as a whole, the region integration index is really low. And when we talk of SADC region per se, it's even lower. So basically, if we narrow down to the SADC, we would say that our integration, even within the regional space, needs to be really looked at by the member states. If I would pick two, I would talk of maybe looking at the infrastructure integration as well as the productive integration. It is imperative for us to really look at the regional integration. Let me start with the infrastructure integration. If you look at the the nations within the SADC region, you would see that the economies are really small, in the sense that we really need to coordinate our efforts if we have to actually move and improve on the global space. There is need to have support in infrastructure development, even looking at the cross-border integration and infrastructure. I'll give an example for Malawi. We have made progress in terms of integrating our logistics between the neighboring countries. From the borders of Jinji, Chipata, that Zambia-Malawi route, we have opened a one-stop border post, which is kind of providing seamless movement of goods and services across the two countries. We're also looking at there's a border post connecting Mozambique and Malawi. And then up north, we're looking at, we're still working on the border post connecting Tanzania and Malawi. So in that space, we were making progress, and I think that's the direction that we need to take as a continent, as a region, to integrate our corridors, be it by rail or ports. The other area that I think we really need to look at is the productive integration. That's another area that we really need to be strategic in the way we coordinate our efforts, looking at the productive sector, which countries within the member states are strong in which areas, and then coordinate the efforts so that together we can actually participate in the global value chains. Thank you.
So if we can just go back to, orient back to industrialization and value chains. So we heard from SADC that there is a deficit. We are not as industrialized as we can be. We are not manufacturing as much. Teboho, where do you see the constraints? Why is it that we are not as industrialized? And what do you think is holding us back in not doing more than what we're currently doing?
Thank you very much for that question, moderator. As starting from the first panel up until now, we have heard from the previous speakers that one of our main problems or challenges are infrastructure development. We also have challenges. We seem only to be producing and exporting at a very primary level as the region. We haven't really diversified into processing. What we need to do as the region in order for us to industrialize is really to work together to integrate, develop value chains together, identify the priority sectors that we can value add, sit together, map the value chains as a region, trying to determine competitiveness for each member state, so that each one of us can see where they fit into the regional value chain. We have the basics. We have our protocols. We have our especially industrial protocol that we need to implement as the region. We really need to harness on those guidelines that have been given in those protocols. If I may give an example of Lesotho, for instance, where we are a bit strong on textiles and clothing. government took a conscious decision to build on infrastructure, to develop textiles and clothing sector-related infrastructure in terms of providing factory shells, in terms of utilities related to textiles and clothing industry. I think also one of the challenges that we face as the region is matching of skills or development of skills to industry. That is one of the reasons, some of the reasons that we are a bit held back. We really we really need to work on developing skills, especially youth skills, to match our industrial objectives. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so what I'm hearing here is that there is a lot of production taking place. Obviously, the primary products, the mines or agricultural produce, is certainly the infrastructure is lacking. If I come to you, sorry?
Can you try maybe this mark?
Or translation?
Yes. I mean, no, the sound doesn't come loud, clear. Maybe try this mark, I don't know.
Okay, you can't hear me from here.
Background. There is
We
a
can't,
background sound.
can't hear you.
We can hear.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so I was saying that, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's
So if I come to you, what we're saying or what we are hearing here is that there is problems of infrastructure. Regional integration is not there. From a Mozambican experience and looking to the rest of SADC, what challenges, what problems really do you see? And, is it fair to say that there is no industrialization, or the opportunities to industrialize and value add are not being fully exploited? I mean, how would you contextualize what is being said so far?
Thank you very much, dear moderator. Well, I think the challenge we face as Mozambique and the SADC region at large, it's similar to the entire continent. The main characteristic that we see the most of the key aspects of African economies that industrial manufacturing accounts to smaller share on the GDP. In the case of Mozambique, we have around 10% contribution of industry in the value chain, in the GDP, while agriculture counts to 25%. So if you look into the economic structure of most of countries, they do have a smaller contribution of manufactured goods. So there's no really a lot of value addition. The exports are mostly commodities. Doesn't matter if agricultural products or minerals, they are exported basically without any kind of beneficiation, which at the end of the day becomes a problem because it does impact on the balance of trade of those countries. Most will basically export, let's say, their raw materials or agricultural product to Asia, and then after the transformation of value addition is they will be re-exported back to Africa where maybe 10 times the price. So the reason for this, it has to do with infrastructure. I think my colleagues from the panel have highlighted that. Poor infrastructure in Africa throughout the continent increase the cost of doing business, the cost of transportation, uncertainty in terms of delivery time. Some areas depend on the weather. If it rains, then there's no movement of goods or people. So I think development of infrastructure is directly linked with industrialization. And industrialization itself is directly linked to the capability, the capacity of countries putting in place the right value chains. If they can complement itself among the countries, the better is. So it will be a win-win exercise. We will be competing, but also cooperating as a region. At the SADC level, we have around 380 million inhabitants, which represent a substantial market. And if you look at the continental level, with around 1.3 billion consumers, I think if we make it to put in place the right value chains, we secure value addition locally, then that will be a plus for all of us. Coming back to, just closing up on the question, that was, I will say we as countries, we are called upon to actually close the gap that exists within the value chain. We can start by adding value to our agricultural products, using SMEs, which are very flexible, using technology that are adapted to Africa and the SADC region in principle. So since, this is just a discussion, part of the discussion, I will not really provide all the answers, but I think the key aspect is that within the BIPs, that was approved and adopted by the country at SADC level, we try to cooperate as much as possible, either to minimize the impact of poor infrastructure in one hand, but also to complement among ourselves. We can add value, produce agricultural products, let's say Mozambique, and then add some value in Zimbabwe and so on. So I will basically stop here.
Okay, no, thank you very much. So what we are hearing is that there's definitely a deficit. We could do more. I think when we framed this discussion, we're talking specific industries where we are seeing the opportunities. I don't know, coming from you, the Secretariat of SADC, coming back to you rather, we're talking of agro-processing. So there is a lot of production on the farms from the land. We're talking of mineral beneficiation. So what are the opportunities? Yes, we've heard the challenges, we've had the problems, but why should we industrialize? Are we capable of industrializing? So where are the opportunities? Why should this be of interest to any investor, that there is opportunities within the SADC region to agro-process, to beneficiate minerals? Where's the investment case? Why should anyone even take notice? Maybe the region is not geared up or suited for such. Where are the opportunities? What should be exciting investors from a regional point of view?
Thank you. The good thing we did as a region when developing the SADC industrialization strategy was also recognizing or putting in place what we call the strategic interventions, the issues that we needed to do to ensure there's industrialization and that regional integration takes place. I think my colleagues here have spoken at length about the issues of infrastructure. Those were seen as binding constraints, things that we needed to remove in order to industrialize. I think we all have an idea of what is happening. I think the earlier panel discussion really touched on that. The other aspect we saw, we identified what we called the growth paths towards in the region. And we picked agriculture, value chains, we picked mineral beneficiation. And this is where the opportunities are as a region. And then we said we have to integrate the region into global and regional value chains. In terms of agriculture, what have we seen over the past 5 or so years when implementing the strategy? I think there's vast opportunities for investment, and I can refer to 4 priority value chains, for instance, that we have picked up, where we saw there are huge gaps for import replacement. It's often said that the reason why, as a developing world or as a region, we are not trading with one another is because we produce mainly raw commodities that we send abroad, and then we actually buy final goods. The data does not really show that. It actually shows that we also import commodities. We import grains, even maize, in our region. We import wheat, we import rice, we import, and these are heavy numbers, soybean. We consume around 3 million metric tons of soybean. We produce less than half of that. And these are the realities we have. So how much have we, both from the private and the public sector, invested in agriculture to be able to actually boost production? Because that's where opportunities are. And I'm happy. I've learned, I think since last year, for instance, Zimbabwe is now, at least, I don't know whether it's the last season or the current one, self-sufficient in wheat. I think that demonstrates how much we can actually do as a region, because that has shown we can do it by being innovative in terms of how we produce, right? Now, these other 4 value chains, 3 value chains I've mentioned, the opportunities are there for us to invest more. Mineral value chains. We are the biggest mining region in the world, but yet we have to rely on importation of mining inputs from elsewhere. We have an opportunity to produce more of some of these mining inputs. We also host some of the very critical minerals that are feeding into the energy transition. We have an opportunity to actually do more. And I think so far we have identified up to 20 projects that would really want the region to chase after and ensure that we are doing value addition. And these are the opportunities that we have really looked at. Pharmaceuticals, again, we are the epicenter of some of the diseases, HIV and I think malaria and to some extent TB. But we know in Africa that we import nearly 99% of our pharmaceutical products from elsewhere. Yet we are the epicenter of the disease. So we have done pre-feasibilities to look at where are the opportunities in the pharmaceuticals. And I think about 4 projects have been picked up, and these are valuable that we want to engage and see that there's actually. So there are opportunities, they are there. I think we can do this. As I said, we see Zimbabwe has done it with wheat. Other countries are trying, but at the same time, we have to address the issue of the binding constraints. That's really real. They have to be jointly developed. You can't have one without the other, and that's really key for us. But opportunities are actually many. Thank you.
No, that's interesting. So, okay, again, so if we're looking at, I think you spoke there about boosting production. I think, yes, that's a given. And I don't know just how much, okay, I don't know if I can start with you, still at the far end. What is the government position, for example, in Malawi, that of what you are producing and sending out to the rest of the world unprocessed, what are the targets and what is the government there doing in collaboration with the rest of the region to ensure that whatever goes out, at least a greater portion of that is processed locally? And can you cite examples where actually this has happened and where perhaps investment can be targeted and focused to increase that, that percentage?
Thank you so much. As a country, I would not have the, maybe if I go to the figures, I will not be very specific, but I would say that currently our import figures are much higher than what we're exporting. And predominantly, we don't value add our agricultural produce, so we're mostly exporting raw produce. And that's an area where, as a country or as an institution, that's the area that we're really focusing on. And In our Malawi Investment 2063 document, industrialization is a pillar on its own, and we're really focusing on how do we improve manufacturing and value addition on our agro-processed. Being an agro-based economy, we do produce a lot of produce. We talk of tobacco is mostly our key product, and then we have tea, we have sugar, we have macadamia nuts is coming up. So we're really trying to find investors in these areas to help us build the value addition so that we're actually exporting products that are already value added to our regional counterparts. Right now, we export a lot of soya in the neighboring countries. We do export a lot of rice in the neighboring countries. But as a country, we're really looking at what can we do to actually value add and make an impactful and meaningful economic sense that we're actually value adding our products. Thank you.
So, okay, maybe specifically on those ones. If we take, say, tea, what policies is the government doing to encourage someone to process and pack tea and actually export it as Malawian tea straight to the consumer? What policies are you discussing, perhaps even within the region, that you believe investors should be aware of, and that these are opportunities that the government of Malawi is supportive of?
On the part of policies, I am aware that the government is working on several policies. Some of them are bilateral in nature, but there are others that we're using the actual trade agreements that are available to see how best we can collaborate in terms of working around the export of our produce.
Okay. So perhaps again from a country experience, I know in Lesotho there is a lot of activity in agriculture in particular, even in minerals. I think government policy is very important there as well. I mean, what role do you see the government playing that investors should be aware of? What opportunities have you created? And where's the collaboration within the region to ensure that the scale perhaps of the activity that we're doing or the business we're generating is worthwhile for investors?
Yes, moderator, thank you. As you have indicated, the country is trying to diversify into agriculture, both production and agro-processing. As a high-altitude country, we have opportunities in deciduous fruits. What the government has done to support that sector at this point in time is to come up with a feasibility mapping. When investors come, they will already know where to invest in terms of deciduous fruits. There are still also opportunities to diversify within the textiles and clothing industry itself. We are at the present moment, we are concentrating more on clothing. There are still opportunities within the household textiles. There are still opportunities as well. If I can go back to agriculture, we are also trying to build our meat industry. There are some projects that have been prepared with regard to those. I may not have a full value proposition in terms of what are the exact opportunities within those projects that have been prepared at the moment. But as Lesotho, it's information that we can give later. There are also efforts as we attract investment, there are also efforts to ensure that we link our indigenous businesses with investors that we will attract. We are trying by all means to develop linkages programs, to develop supplier development programs, so that our investors are also supported by our indigenous businesses. There's also policy development, investment policy development. We also have one-stop business facilitation that when the investor comes, they are even able to apply for their licenses remotely. So when they come to invest, there is support that is given to them. There is hand-holding. We have our investment promotion agency that also assists investors that come to invest in our country. There's aftercare, there's facilitation, there's that. As I indicated before, consciously also there is infrastructure development. The country has developed or constructed market centers so that any investors that get into the fruits and vegetable space already have market centers, have space to sell. That is the role that government has played in terms of infrastructure development for agro-processing. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So the reason for forming this regional bloc, SADC, was to integrate the region. So I'm coming back to you from the Secretariat of SADC to integrate the region. And I guess also to identify the constraints why that integration is not moving as fast as possible. So industrialization, I think, is one of the key pillars. I know there are various protocols that exist within the SADC region. So if I look from you at the Secretariat, when you scan the entire region, and it's a big region, I think we've heard it, we're talking of 16 countries, from South Africa down in the south, I think as far up north we go to the DRC and into the Indian Ocean as far as Seychelles. So it's a very big region, and I'm sure the experiences of industrialization there are different. But when you then look at the lack of industrialization processes and these constraints that we are hearing, the infrastructure, the lack of transportation or logistic networks within that region, if you were to then say that as a region, Southern Africa stands out as a great opportunity for any investor, what would you say would be the priorities or are the priorities for the region to capitalize on these opportunities or the potential that we have? And where would we then direct investors? And so we're talking here of agro-processing. We've heard of the tea and the fruit and vegetable in Lesotho. We are talking of the mineral beneficiation. So if you were to direct, and from a policy point of view, say to yourselves that within SADC, if we amalgamate our resources and focus them, say in this country, develop this logistical system or this infrastructure, this would be a winner. I mean, where do you see that discussion taking you? Where would you naturally pivot to and say, that for us is a priority and let's focus on that first?
Thank you. Well, in terms of infrastructure, I probably wouldn't be maybe the best to answer, but I think what we have, if you look at the developed world, to move bulk goods across borders, they mostly use rail. We are using road, and that is not reliable and very costly too. So we definitely have to look into that area and particularly focusing on rail infrastructure. Our current rail network is more or less how those who colonized us left them. They developed the rail to take things out of the region to the world markets, we have not integrated our rail infrastructure to connect ourselves. And I think we need to do that. It's a critical area for us. There's the critical area of energy. We need cheap and reliable energy system that then would necessitate, make sure that our production is competitive. We really need to focus in that space. So for me, those are two critical areas that we need to focus on in terms of encouraging investment, particularly on infrastructure. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I think we are hearing it. We are getting somewhere in terms of an appreciation of what our region has in store, where the challenges are. Certainly, I think beneficiation. The idea obviously being that we want to integrate this region as much as possible to make it seamless to move across. In the last panel, we're talking even of monetary unions, customs union, and so forth. Those are some of the enablers, but we're still lacking on that. I think if you take the 16 countries individually, obviously within our region we have a giant in terms of economy, that's South Africa. And by many regards or standards is highly industrialized. There is a lot of processing there, a lot of industrialization. So again, it's some way we can also leverage on that the knowledge or the capability or the ability within the region to be industrialized is not that far off. But what we are working on collectively is to ensure that how can we boost? We've heard just now that there is a deficit in some crops, in some outputs, where we're actually not being able to sustain ourselves. So again, I see those as opportunities that in those countries that have surpluses, I think investment certainly can be directed into the neighboring countries to also boost that. But at the end of the day, it's about value addition and manufacturing. And the infrastructure that we're talking about, that's a big opportunity. It's an opportunity for an investor to see the potential or the capability of the collective region to then do so. We are coming towards the end of our discussion. You've heard the panel. You've seen where possibly issues are. From the audience, if there are any questions or areas that you perhaps want more insight or better clarification, let's open it up, and please just raise your hand and ask us those questions. We'll be more than happy to answer you from here. Okay. While we're waiting for our microphone to then come in, if I can, just go back to you, my brother at Mozambique. Mozambique also hosts one of our busiest ports, Beira. I think it supports a lot of exports out to from Zimbabwe, Malawi, and as far as Zambia. So I think for us that is the nearest port. There is another huge port, Walvis Bay, Namibia, as well as down in Durban in South Africa. So the infrastructure is there, but I guess the cry here is that these ports need to be busier. Looking from a Beira point of view and the potential for that, right? Obviously, you are exporting from the rest of the region unprocessed facilities. What investment do you think could also encourage investors to handle, I don't know, maybe fresh produce or manufactured goods? And what opportunities do you see there for the investors to make that a much busier port?
Yeah, moderator, thank you very much for quite an interesting question. I think we point out the need of better infrastructure to facilitate the free movement of people and goods, which we mentioned, the constraints, key constraints, and Beira Port is not, different in terms of the number of challenges that they face. The port of Beira is part of what we call the three main corridors in Mozambique. So we have Nacala corridor that links Nacala port, a deep sea port, combined with an international airport, to Malawi, Zambia, and it can even go as far as DRC. Then we have Beira at the central area, Mozambique, that connects mainly the Maputo, the Beira port to Zimbabwe via road, railway, and also a pipeline. Then we have a central, in the southern part, we have the Maputo corridor, Limpopo corridor that connects Maputo port to Eswatini and to southern part of the South Africa, the Gauteng region. However, all this infrastructure, they are not able to provide the free access or flow of goods. We are now confronted in Beira Port that a lot of costs in demurrage costs for ships coming to, for instance, to unload fuel. Because Beira nowadays is a busy port. We know that Dar es Salaam is an alternative, and then even Elvis Bay down in South Africa. But those ports are very busy. We have exports of cocoa from Zambia. We have a lot of agricultural products from Malawi. Actually, we are the easiest access to the sea from Malawi. So, however, Mozambique is now confronted with the possibility of expanding its port. We have an internal program that we call it's called PRONAI, which stands for Promote Industrialization of Mozambique, where the key strategy is to add value to agricultural products. And then from, as you mentioned, agricultural products, beef, leather, livestock, value addition, put in place abattoir, put in place cold system that allow the conservation of the products, value addition, the local, so that the volume of these products is reduced and its value is substantial. We are all facing deficit on our trade balance, mostly because we spend more importing than really exporting. So our key role as an institution, we are actually looking into not promoting the volumes, but also diversification of exports. Unfortunately, in the region, we are also doing the same kind of crops. I heard from Malawi, they're now busy doing macadamia because it's one of the most sought after nut. We are also doing macadamia. South Africa is also doing macadamia. So what happened is that most of our macadamia is taken to South Africa and then branded as South African macadamia. So if you can add values, smaller technology in each country, then we'll even reduce the volume of export. So in short, and I also give opportunity to my colleagues to have a saying on this topic.
Okay.
I would say we can combine also joint promotion activity as we are doing now. Not only market individual our countries as an investment destination, but make sure that if an investor put a processing plant in Mozambique, he will have critical mass to operate throughout the year by sourcing raw materials from other countries. So we build clusters.
Yeah.
In short, thank you very much.
Yeah. So I think if we're talking also in terms of manufacturing and processing, I think there's one infrastructure or that we have not spoken about. Southern Africa currently has a big deficit of electricity. It's a problem, and you really can't process and value add without electricity. But on the plus side, we are talking here of a region that is well connected in terms of electricity grid. So there's what is called the Southern Africa Power Pool. Essentially, our grid network cuts across 8 countries within Southern Africa. So if anybody was to invest in power generation, your market is not in the country where that electricity is being generated. But essentially, where the demand is highest, it can easily be switched. So if you're generating power in Namibia or in Mozambique or Malawi, and Malawi is okay for that point in time and the power needs to be shipped to, say, Namibia or South Africa, it can easily run through that. So that's another thing that's also an enabler. We have a deficit right now, but we are looking to investment in that. It's an opportunity, that will also boost agro-processing. You can imagine right now, any factory or trying to process these things that we're talking about without definite assurance that there will be power throughout the 24 hours of operation. It's a discouraging factor. And so I guess one could argue that maybe our industrialization is not happening because of that. But it's an opportunity, I think, that you are supplying power or your guarantee on a return on investment is not in the country that you are stationed. So it's something that I think as a region we've done very well. But also it means that when there's a deficit, it affects everybody. But we're looking towards the future and those possible investments. I don't know if there's still any questions in the audience. If not, maybe just last words. If we start maybe the far end, my sister, just parting shots, final words on our topic here today.
Thank you so much, moderator. I think I don't have much to say. It's just that to say, as a region, we are open to investment. I think there's been a lot of talk about opportunities that are available within the region, be it in the agro-processing sector, be it in the energy sector, tourism as well. So I would say, as a region, SADC is open for investments. Thank you.
Thank you. My parting shot will be very short. Yeah. FDI for industrialization is important to the region. Thank you.
Mine is very short, but before I proceed, I would like to acknowledge the presence of 4 provincial governors of Mozambique that are attending this event, and encourage, of course, other representatives from other SADC countries, and say we as a region, we should compete, but also cooperate in order to build a stronger value chains in the region that complement themselves. In short, I think SADC over the last years has become a region that becomes the future of Africa, and as part of the African Free Trade Area, the future of the world. So food will be a critical asset in the world, and SADC is one of the regions that produce a lot of food. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, we might not be industrializing at the level that we wanted, but I think we should, as a region, not despair. Am I worried that we missed the target? I think it was always bound to happen. As you start, you always start very slow, but I think we are no longer talking about potential in the region. There are real opportunities that we can capitalize on and really ensure there's actually industrialization. And I think that's what we should focus on. Thank you.
All right, it just leaves me on behalf of SADC to thank you for attendance. And I hope you've learned something today about our region and the opportunities that we have. I think in short, we do produce a lot of products, but they're currently in raw form. And for our region, it's a deliberate policy that the region collectively and the governments individually have taken, that we must manufacture more, we must value add more. What we can value add to is immense. It's a wide array of products, from minerals to agricultural products. The market, again, you can do that for the domestic market within the region. As we better these road networks, they are there. It's not that they're not there, but we just want them to be more efficient. That's a big market. The wider world and Africa in general is another huge market. So the opportunities are definitely there. So once again, thank you, and I wish you a pleasant day. Bye.
Thank you very much, CEO, for moderating this high-level panel discussion, as well for your leading. And thank you, panelists, for your thoughts and perspective on industrial and value chain. Thank you so much. As we close, allow me to invite Madame Angela, the Chairman of the SADC Investment Subcommittee, to close this forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Master of Ceremonies. Yes, just a formal closure of the forum. Ladies and gentlemen, It's now my honor and privilege to deliver the vote of thanks for this gathering. As the SADC Regional Focus Forums, we have indeed, this has been a joint effort of our regional community, and it underlines our commitments to showcase the region at international platforms such as the AIM Global 2023. Of course, during the panel debates, the discussants clearly demonstrated that the development of infrastructure will not only promote and sustain regional economic development, but it's also critical in contributing to improved social conditions. Likewise, panelists emphasize the development of regional value chains, as you've just heard now, is important for our regional integration, sustained growth and industrialization of the SADC region. It was also underscored that our governments need to create an enabling environment which should form the foundation to deliver and assist us to accelerate the realization of our industrialization agenda. This, together with the availability of a pipeline of bankable projects, financial sustainability of project funding, and most importantly, the partnership with private sector should transform our SADC economies. It is my belief that the vibrant and thought-provoking deliberations today of our panelists will contribute to the successful outcome of this forum. May I especially extend words of gratitude to the facilitators and panelists for sharing their expertise, knowledge, and experience with us today. At this juncture, I would also like to recognize the AIM organizers for hosting us in Abu Dhabi at the AIM 2023. And finally, for the team putting this event together, your hard work is appreciated and valued. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, let me once again thank you all for your participation here at the forum, and let us strive to keep the momentum of driving the infrastructure development and the industrialization process as the SADC region. I also trust that this event has enthused business people and companies present here today to expand their investments into our region, and that we convinced you that as SADC we do mean business. I thank you.